Hello.
Oh my goodness, woman. Well, as I was just saying a few moments ago, we're just going to dive right in because this is I cannot wait to hear this story again. This is so good. This is such a good thing. But I have to ask you can you believe we're having this conversation?
No, I know. I visualized it along the journey so many times. It's quite surreal that we're actually here.
I know. And isn't it it's insane because you're going from being a listener
hmm
to a guest.
Yeah.
And I cannot wait to hear all the bombs that you're going to drop here. So why don't you start off by sharing with the women listening, how did you find yourself on this journey? And we'll start there.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so we started trying just after we got married. So it was 2018. So I was 35 then. And straight away, right off the bat, there was a couple of blocks. I never expected that it was going to happen quickly. I think part of that was when I was 15, I did one of the usual teenage girly things and got really skinny and lost my period for a year. And I had a doctor tell me, when I went there and I was like, what's going on? And they said, if you don't fix this quickly, you're going to have trouble having children. And that just always stayed with me. And sure enough, my mum took me out for a milkshake straight away afterwards. And I got above the weight range that I needed to. So that was all good. My period came back really quickly. But, I carried that for another 20 years, just thinking that it wasn't going to happen. And the other part of it was that I was determined not to make this journey traumatic. So I was trying to go in with little to no expectations about every month it happening. But I think what I did was I put the negativity out there that it wasn't going to happen quickly for me. And so, putting that into the universe straight away, it was a couple of blocks immediately. What I haven't filled you in on too much, Roseanne, is that, hindsight is such a great thing that right from the beginning, I think the universe was actually laying the groundwork for my spiritual growth and my spiritual awakening on this journey. And there's going to be a theme throughout this whole story that I tell. But, what I've come to learn is that the universe and our journey here on earth is forcing you to grow. And there was a whole lot of breadcrumbs along the way that was forcing me to. And obviously, when things are going well, you don't really grow that. You don't really grow that much. You have to have crisis to learn and force yourself to push through it. So, and it was really interesting because I am not, or I wasn't a spiritual person. In fact, back at, in school, my friend was very spiritual and we always used to joke that she was a spiritual one and I was the shallow one. But the groundwork actually started a few years before I started trying to conceive. It was 2015 when it was the 1 year anniversary of my grandma's death. And I'm like, I'm just going to go to a medium and see what he says. I don't believe in it. I gave him nothing when we were there, but we established that my grandma was coming through and he's like, your cousin, we were establishing that it was my cousin we were talking about. She's pregnant. And I'm like, no, she only had a baby 7 months ago. That's not right. And he's like, no, she's pregnant. And so I told my mum that and she saw her that night and she said, are you pregnant? And my cousin, got shocked and went, I'm 6 weeks. How do you know? I haven't told anybody. And so and my mum goes, oh, grandma told Tanya. And we just thought that was hilarious. But about a week later, she miscarried the baby. And a few weeks after that, my mum actually thought, I'm going to go to this medium, see what he has to say. He didn't know that we were related. We gave him no background, anything like that. She just went. But again, grandma came through and was saying, she is pregnant. She is pregnant. And mum's like, no, she's lost the baby. And over the next few months, my cousin just kept feeling really sick. She would have ultrasounds, no baby there. And eventually they got to the point where they're like, okay, we're going to have to do some surgery. You must have just some residual tissue there. And so just before they went to do that, they did another ultrasound and they went, oh my God, you're 16 weeks pregnant. There's a baby there. So my grandma was over the other side just going, no, she's pregnant. And it turns out that she had been pregnant with twins. She'd miscarried one of the twins and there's they can mask the other one for a period of time. So that just was the first thing where I went, okay, I think there's something out there, but I didn't know kind of what much more about it. But I was like, something, you can't just flip that kind of stuff.
Well, I think we all want to get to know your grandmama right now because we want to see what she's got to say about a lot of things.
Oh,
Wow. What
yeah. My grandma was an amazing woman when she's here, and it shouldn't surprise me that she's doing awesome things over there too.
wow. What an incredible. I mean, that's an incredible experience. I mean, you must have to go from I don't really like no, none of this to that place. I mean, so how do you think that served you for what was to come? Because I agree with you. I don't believe that these things just sort of happen accidentally. I think the story starts way before we think it does.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I think that just opened me up a little bit to being open to the possibility that there was something more than just blackness and emptiness when we die, you know? And so I had another reading with this medium in 2019. So a couple of months after we started trying. At that point, I wasn't stressed, you know, like was very laissez-faire. I'm super chill about lots of things. And he goes, look, I see a pregnancy for you, but I'm not going to lie. It's going to be up and down. I can see, you know, you going through some emotion. I can see you kind of breaking down and going, I'm crying. I don't know why I'm crying, but I'm crying. But he goes, but I want to tell you that everything is going to be okay. And he actually goes, I'm saying this for the recording, Tanya. Everything is going to be okay. And you don't know how many times I ended up listening to that over the years. But what he said to me at the time was that I see this pregnancy. I see it in February 2020. So a year's time. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm not going to like go down an emotional, you know, craziness in a year. I'm sweet. And then sure enough, so we had no luck all through 2019. And by 2020, I started to worry. February rolled around and nothing happened. And, you know, I kind of just dismissed it as, he was wrong. And so across 2020, I had 3 IUIs. None of them worked. And I remember sitting in the park, I think I was doing some yoga, and I just really started like that fear started to kick in where I was like, is this actually not going to happen for me? And that's when the roller coaster started of, you know, a whole lot of poking and prodding tests. I, you know, with acupuncture, I was doing yoga. I was trying to keep myself calm. I was meditating on the Chinese herbs. I even tried hypnosis. I went keto vegan for a while, which is, you know, very difficult. Doesn't leave you much to eat there. I had a couple of endometriosis surgeries. I didn't have a lot of endometriosis, but I had a little bit. I even tried a past life regression. So I was doing all of this. And then in October 2020, I had a reading with a different medium. And she goes, there's a little girl around you. Are you trying to conceive? And I'm like, yeah, I am. And that was the first time that I was introduced to the concept of spirit babies and that our future children are around us, you know, well before they conceive. And I was just like, oh, wow. But it prompted me to really dive into being quite intrigued about everything that was going on. So I was listening to podcasts, reading books, all of that kind of thing, and starting to really delve into the concept of spirit babies. And Peter, my first medium, his prediction did come true. I was ending up in tears over nothing. Not too much. I'm still pretty level-headed, but, you know, the first night I met one of my friend's new boyfriends and we were having a girls' night out, and I'd probably had about 10, maybe 20 cocktails. I'd had a lot. And I ended up in tears going, oh, I've made a fool of myself, you know, and to this day, I still think that he thinks that I'm a nutcase. And, you know, and New Year's Eve became really difficult for me because it's like another year's rolling around and I still don't have my baby here. So it was really interesting that actually came true. And it wasn't anything. It wasn't in the back of my mind. I don't think. By February 2021, we did our first round of IVF because nothing was working. I never wanted to do IVF. I didn't feel like I needed it. I felt like this baby was still coming naturally. But of course, when you're, you know, 2.5 years down the track and your biological clock's ticking, you've got to try that. And so that one was relatively successful in that we only got 6 eggs. I only had 1 ovary respond, but 3 of them we got to embryo stage. So we transferred 1 and froze 2. That one didn't take though. I thought I was surrendering to the process. By that point, I'd been starting to work on myself, work on my mindset a little bit. I'm like, yeah, I'm surrendering. But when I look back at it, I was fully kidding myself. So we just kind of kept trying naturally for the next few months. And then in November 2021, I connected with a Canadian spirit baby medium. She specializes in spirit babies. And she just went deep into what was going on. But again, and it was consistent with all of these mediums that I was speaking to, that there was a girl and she was super strong and she was going to be a firecracker and she was coming through. But there was also a little boy hanging around me as well in the background. By August 2022, so I kind of just kept trying naturally. Nothing happened. August 2022, we did our second round of IVF. And I always felt that when I would do an IVF cycle, the universe would start throwing obstacles at me. Like the best laid plans would go awry. Everything just would feel way out of whack. And, taking time off of work, I hadn't, confided in work that I was, on this journey or anything like that. So I'd carefully planned, this is when I can take some time off. And of course, a couple of days before my egg retrieval was due, I got told by work I had to make a trip interstate on the day of my egg retrieval. And I'm like, I can't go. So I had my egg retrieval the next morning at 6 a.m. I was on a plane interstate. That IVF cycle was a complete disaster in that the day after, so when you get your call for your day one, how did the fertilization go? The embryologist called me when I was in a break from these all-day workshops that I was in and said, sorry, none of your eggs are fertilized. And I was like, what? Like how? How does it even happen? I didn't even know that was a thing. And I was devastated. But as we all do these, we push through. 5 minutes later, I had to go back into a workshop and get my head back in the game and, pretend that my world hadn't just been rocked and I'd just flushed thousands of dollars of, down the drain. So after that one, I was really angry. I was annoyed. I was looking for someone to blame, did the lab stuff up? What happened? I even considered, I talked to my spirit baby medium again. And I said to her, should we ask this girl to step out the way? If she's like meant to be the first one, like she's taking her sweet time, like get out the way. Come on, let someone else through. And we decided that was probably a knee-jerk reaction and I shouldn't do that. I should probably just take a break and take some time to heal. So I took about a 4-month break. I took a break from everything, all of my prenatal supplements, acupuncture. I stopped everything. But around this time, I had another reading with my first medium, Peter. And he, again, kept saying, it's coming. But he said, I just don't feel like you're in the right energetic space still. And he goes, I can see a jolt coming. And he goes, it's not going to be bad, but it's going to be enough to cause you to kind of react and shift your kind of energetic space. And he said it's coming in January. I was like, whatever. I don't know what you're talking about. Come on. January 2023 rolls around. I'm ready to start trying again. So I switched clinics, went to a really renowned IVF doctor, and I started another round of IVF. Right in the middle of that, they'd done some tests, and one of them was called the DQ alpha gene test. And I got a phone call, I think it was one Friday at lunchtime, with the results of that. I was already into my injections and everything. And they said, you're a partial match for the DQ alpha gene, which for those who aren't familiar with it, kind of means that out of 25,000 genes in your body, there's 2 that are really important for your body to tell an embryo that it's safe. It's not cancer rapidly dividing. It is a foreign entity, but it's okay. We're happy to be here. And so my husband and I had a partial match, which meant that message wasn't going through to my body. And so my immune system was going on the march and potentially killing embryos. And the way around that was some kind of a procedure, which was called the LMIT procedure. It's a bit of exposure therapy, but also just hectic immune suppressants. And so I got off that call and I was just like, oh my God, quite rocked again. How long is this journey going to go on for? This is just not great. And I took my dog for a walk to go and get some Subway. And we got to Subway and I just tied him up out the front. I walked in, literally I was 2 meters away from him. I could see him. And I looked back and he was gone. And I went, oh my God. And I ran out and the guy goes, he's slipped his harness. And I ran out and I see him just bolting towards the main road. And I'm like, Maverick, he's my baby. I love this dog more than I love anything in the world. So I start sprinting after him. He takes a turn. He starts running along the sidewalk of the main road, and I'm screaming at people walking the other way, like, grab him. So they try and grab him, and he jumps over a barricade and straight into the oncoming traffic and just starts weaving through the traffic. And I'm just running along, just going, I'm about to see my dog get killed here. I'm like, oh my God, oh my God. And so I'm chasing him, sprinting as fast as I could. And then he makes a left turn, and I'm like, down a street. And I'm like, he's running home. And I turn and I get around the corner, and there's this ute that's just slowed down. They've obviously just dodged him. And I'm like, did you see your dog? And they're like, yeah, yeah. And I'm like, can you give me a lift? And I jump in the tray of their truck, and they zoom around, and I'm in the back of the car calling my husband, get home, the dog's like loose. He never does this, by the way. He's like the chillest dog ever. And so we drive, and I'm like, take a left here, take a left here. We pull up out the front of my house. He's on the front doorstep. He'd run a kilometre home. And it took a solid 24 hours for my heart rate to ease. But that was certainly the first of many jolts of January, in that I realized that things can be perfect 1 second and it can change in an instant like that. And we have to have gratitude for life, right? So a few probably days after, my father-in-law had a mild heart attack, but it was enough that it was a warning sign that he needed open heart surgery. And he had to wait about a week and a half to have that. So while he's sitting at home trying to keep really calm, not let his heart rate go up, I look out the front, and, we're kind of like, oh, this feels a bit like a ticking time bomb. I look out the front of my house one day, and there was 8 ambulances across the road at my neighbour's house. And I go over and I see what I think is my neighbour laying on the ground with this big defibrillator on his chest. They're trying to shock him back to life. And they're like, oh, he's in cardiac arrest, blah, 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 blah. As it turns out, it was my neighbour's friend, just looked like the same guy. But we stood there, my neighbour and I, and watched them shock him 8 times and load him into the ambulance, and looking very grave. And as they drove off, I went, I think I've just seen someone die, so we had 2 heart attacks. And then a long-term family friend ended up in ICU a few weeks later with a heart attack as well. They all survived. They all survived. But it really, like I said, made me realize that we really have to appreciate the time that we have here on earth, because it can change in the blink of an eye. And so I feel like I was like, okay, we got to get to the end of January because the shit's going wild here. These jolts are crazy. But it really did shift my appreciation for life. And I really started focusing on living and making the most of every day rather than sleepwalking through everything. So that 3rd round of IVF didn't work either. We had 2 embryos go right through until day 6. But again, we got a phone call from the clinic saying, sorry, neither of them are viable. And so that was another one that was just a complete disaster. But luckily, a few weeks earlier, at the very start of January, I had started my full throttle course with you. So I'd been listening to your podcast for quite a long time, but we'd started that mindset work. And so that's where you came into it.
Wow. Well, it sounds like it was a good time too, because with all of this insanity, what's fascinating to me about this as I'm hearing what you're sharing from your life is every single one of these instances, whether it was talking to Peter or, all of these different things, were really showing you and helping to equip you with a belief that was bigger than what you could see with your eyes. Because it's so easy for us to be limited by our current circumstances that we can't see beyond that. But when you open up that part of you, dare we call it faith, and understanding that you were able to go from feeling sorry for yourself, kind of feeling like there are no options and all this other stuff, into a place of, wow, okay, my dog almost just died. I saw 2 people with heart attacks, but I'm going to be grateful.
Yeah.
That seems like a very different move.
Yeah.
And, because most people would be just like, wow, you took these very jarring experiences that were happening on top of the 3 failed IVFs and were able to process that completely differently. And this is why, I remember when we spoke before that that's how I could tell that you were ready to make a change because you didn't just immediately go into chaos. You're like, wow, life is really precious. I'm going to, choose to be grateful. And that's incredible. That says a lot about how quickly you were able to start making changes. So it would be awesome if you would share, like, why did you do that program? Because you could have just continued to be a listener.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Look, I think, and it's a shame that it takes us to get to this point, but I had got to the point where I had tried everything. I had hit rock bottom. I had been trying to DIY it through your podcasts for a long time. And I just went, you know what? I got to invest in myself and really dive into this, and I'm ready now. And I think, I'd considered doing your programs maybe 2 years earlier, and I probably wasn't ready, and I wasn't ready to throw myself into that wholeheartedly. And I got to the point where I was ready to do it, and I would throw my whole heart and soul into it, which is what I did. As we went through the program, I was really open to it, and it was just, I was ready to make those changes. And even with, the spirituality stuff, it was really interesting that, I didn't think I was going crazy. I knew I wasn't going crazy, but the words that were coming out of my mouth, I was like, people are going to think I'm crazy. Like I didn't share too much with my husband about it because he would have had me committed, but I talked to my mum about it, and I had a small group of friends who I would talk to about it, and they just wholeheartedly believed along with me as well. They weren't like, oh, that's nice, yeah, maybe your baby will come. They were just very much like, every time I would see my friends, they'd be like, have you had another spirit baby medium reading? Like, what's the latest, type thing. So it was really cool that I had people that were on this journey with me that also believed as much as I grew to believe, which obviously grew through the Full Throttle program. Do you want me to go into what happened next?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, it would be really interesting to kind of see, like, because I think you make a really interesting point when you said you were ready.
Yeah.
How did you know you were ready?
I think I was just, what would it be? I was ready because I knew that it was something else had to change. This wasn't just a physical thing. And I knew enough that there was some kind of a energetic block going on or something like that. Something was just not quite working. I had to shift whatever was happening inside of me, not from a physical space, but from a mindset. I needed to shift my mindset. I was sick of just, constantly being worried and it becoming all consuming, because the journey it becomes all consuming. Every waking thought that you have becomes about that. And I was just tired of it. And I just wanted to take back charge of my life, I would say.
Wow. Well, yeah. So, like, walk us through. I mean, what happened next? So you did Full Throttle. That's a 90-day program. Tell us what happened next for you.
Yeah. So the universe, again, as you often say, is often working with us, right? And I think you've referenced a divine delay in the conception space, the divine delay, right? And there was a divine delay in that, in January after the last failed IVF, I needed to wait 4 months to see an interstate doctor who was going to be able to help me address some of this DQ alpha gene issue. And so across that time, I did Full Throttle and I focused on my mindset. My dream was that here's the beagle that just took
we love doggies.
Where are you, Matt? I used to say.
Oh my goodness. We're so glad he's alive. We're so glad he's alive. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So my dream was to conceive naturally. And so I started to take charge, and I had a game plan, and I wasn't leaving without my baby, So instead of focusing on every treatment being a do or die, it was like, I know my baby's coming, and this is my game plan that I'm going to do. And if this one doesn't work, then I just move on to the next one. So I was living life to the full. I was embracing my life. I had my 40th birthday looming in April. And I know I addressed this with you on a call as well. And I realized in hindsight that number 440 was like a looming deadline for me. It had been for the past 5 years. I'd always felt like as long as I'm still in my 30s, I'm okay. But once I hit 40, shit, it's over, right? And so we decided to go to Hawaii for my birthday. I was like, I don't want to have a party. I don't really, just to celebrate this number. I actually just I love traveling. Let's go to Hawaii and have great life experiences instead. So we went there. Just before we went to Hawaii, it was Easter, and we were sitting around the campfire, and my brother-in-law said, I think I'm going to do the half marathon this year in July. And I was like, shit, yeah, I might join you. And I'm not a runner. I only, run 5Ks and I hate every second of it. But we had 12 weeks to train. And I was like, no, I really feel like I want to do this, give myself this challenge. And that's not, I knew that as a woman who's trying to conceive, pushing your body to those kind of limits is probably not ideal. But for me, it felt right. And so over 12 weeks, I did this program, this running program that I downloaded from an app. And my podcast that I would listen to, or my running music or whatever, was the Miracle, specifically the Miracle Mama interviews. So I ran over 350 kilometers of training, listening to these women talking about, how they did it. And that was prompting me to go, I can't wait until this day arrives where I can share my story too. But I was also really feeling quite connected to these Piro babies. When I'd be dragging myself through a kilometer, I'd be like, come on, guys, help me out here. And I'd feel this little push that would propel me a bit forward. And I was really feeling like it was it was something that I was kind of bonding with them through. But the other thing that was really critical for me is that the belief in my body grew, because every extra kilometer that I ran that I'd never run before, I'm like, okay, I'm now 40 and I'm running the furthest I've ever run in my life. If I can do this, of course I can create a baby. I'm not old. I'm not over the hill. I can do whatever I set my mind to. So I think that was a really big pivotal part as well. So
it's like you had a head transplant, Tanya.
Yeah, I did. It was great. And, I grew to enjoy running, actually, which I never thought would ever happen to me. So we went overseas 3 times in 6 months. We went to Bali, we went to Hawaii, as I said, and I went to New Zealand as well. We went to New Zealand in May, hiked a glacier, one of the most insane, awesome things in the world to ever do. Like, it was just, these glaciers are rapidly receding, and to be standing up there on top of this world, just like having choppered in onto the glacier, it was just the coolest thing ever. And so I was living, and I started following Amy Raup, is that how I pronounce her surname, her egg quality diet. The other part of it is that for 8 years I'd been a vegetarian. I did it from an animal ethics point of view. I liked meat, but I just couldn't cope with it. But for some reason, and I didn't think I'd ever go back to eating meat, but when I started to follow her diet, I suddenly went, I think I'm okay to introduce a little bit of meat again. So I started to have a little bit of fish, maybe chicken once a week. Beef's a little bit of a step too far. It's those lamb and pork and all that still. But I really only got to get into her diet I probably really only got to follow it properly for like a 4-week period, because I kept going on these holidays and I wasn't going to eat a very restrictive diet while I was on these holidays. But by May, I finally had this consult with the doctor interstate, and he started the consult with, you've got this DQ alpha gene. These are your only options: surrogate, donor egg, donor sperm, donor embryo, or you have to do this hectic immune protocol that I'm going to be on. And he started listing all of these things off. And I'm not a medicator. Taking the immune suppressants really didn't feel right to me, because I'm like, for all intents and purposes, like, I'm a healthy person. My immune system is working. And I was really quite concerned about what suppressing my immune system to that extent would do. So I just didn't quite feel good about it, but I wasn't ruling it out, because I knew that I wasn't leaving without my baby, so I would do whatever I needed to do. But I didn't like his bedside manner. I knew he wasn't in my bump squad, but I took him for what I needed, and that was, I needed something from him. I needed him to give me this referral to do something, and that's all I was going to use. But I was able to compartmentalize it, rather than him be this grim reaper that sent me into a spin that, no, that's him. He's this old washed up codger. I'm just going to use him for what I need to. And across this journey also were the signs, and there's obviously a whole week of signs in Full Throttle, which I love. And the more that you become open to them, the more they just start coming everywhere. So for a couple of years, these little birds, the swallows that zoom around everywhere, whenever I'd be, thinking about fertility or thinking about children, they would just pop up out of nowhere. The other one was feathers, like black and white feathers in particular. And I remember I went for a run while we were doing the program, and I was running along and I started to see all these feathers everywhere. And I got to about counting 7, and I was like, all right, guys, let's round it up to a nice even 8. If this is actually, a proper sign, let's land and round it up. The next minute, the 8th one arrives. And then about 2 steps later, there's a baby's dummy on the ground. And I was like, well, that's cool. By the end of my run, I'd counted 15 black and white feathers. And I think I put it in our Full Throttle chat. I'm like, girls, this is pretty crazy. Like, there's a lot of defeathered birds out here at the moment.
Yeah, somebody's plucking, some kind of a bird is getting abused or something.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. They were everywhere. But, when I was running along and seeing all these feathers, it popped into my head, and gosh, I couldn't even tell you when the last time I watched The Wizard of Oz was, though. But it was like, it's kind of a bit like following the yellow brick road. Like, you're following these breadcrumbs all the way along. And dragonflies was another one. Dragonflies, again, never any connection to dragonflies, but when you have these unique encounters with animals that just can't be put down to coincidence, it starts to just become, a really obvious sign. And so they would always be I'd be out the back doing something, and all of a sudden they'd just start zooming around everywhere. Even when I went to Bali, there was a dragonfly hovering over the pool for forever. And I remember that I was at like a little coastal town on holiday, and I was walking along, and I walked under some trees where there was some cockatoos above, and one of them dropped a massive acorn on my or pine cone on my foot to the point that it bled. And then the next second, a dragonfly popped up and followed me as I was walking for the next couple of blocks. And then I went down to the beach, and there were swarms of dragonflies everywhere. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. So they were just popping up everywhere. But I guess my mindset had shifted into so many different areas. And so I had it written down. Where were my notes on it? Because I didn't want to. So the first one, as we talked about, was gratitude, right? Like, I recognized what I did have instead of what I didn't. I live in a beautiful country. I've got a wonderful husband. I've got a wonderful family. I've got a great, good job. I've got resources. Like, I'm not in a war zone. Like, life is good. I'm missing this little piece, which is obviously really important to me, but life is good and it's full of blessings. The other one was I took control of my life. I stopped messing around. I was training to achieve the half marathon. We were making plans to do a massive renovation on our house. We were looking for an investment property. We were making plans to do a side hustle for our business. There was just a whole lot of stuff that was going on. We were making travel plans. We were going to go and travel around Australia for like a year. We had, I sat in an online line for 2 days to get Taylor Swift tickets into Australian concerts in February this year coming. We were making plans to go to Mexico for a friend's birthday, our friend's wedding in April next year, all of that kind of stuff. Like, it was just, I was living, and I was living with purpose as well. And I always liked this quote that I found when I was gallivanting around the world. When was it? 2010 and 11. And I was feeling like I was living my life. And it's, life's journey is not to arrive at the grave safely in a well-preserved body, but rather to skid in sideways, totally worn out, shouting, holy shit, what a ride. And that's,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, I know. It's so good. And that one popped up, and it's always stayed with me all of these years since. And that's what I felt like I was doing. I was really living my life. I fully surrendered, and I trusted everything that would work out as it should. So I didn't just have hope. My hope that my baby would come turned into an actual belief. And that was a big shift for me when I talked about how I was kidding myself about surrendering those few years earlier. I still had hope. I was like, yeah, I hope that they'll turn up. But it fully shifted into unequivocal belief that it was going to happen. I just needed to let it happen. I trusted my intuition. Like, in my heart, I knew that this baby would come naturally. And also your teachings, Roseanne, transferred into every other part of my life and other people's lives. You know, I could see when my husband was coming from lack and scarcity, and I would be like, "You're coming from lack and scarcity. Come on now, mate," you know.
Did your husband have a tiny Roseanne thing on the door where he threw darts? Did he have a little target? Like, my wife is brainwashed into believing she can do whatever she wants.
Yeah, she's joined a cult. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he, you know, I could see that by my energy shifting and the excitement that was happening around me, his energy was shifting too. And there was just, you know, he was coming on this without even realizing it. He was changing as well.
I love that you shared that, Tanya, because people need to hear that.
Mhm.
You know, like people always, well, you know, and it's funny because sometimes women ask me, well, you know, what about my husband in these programs? And I'm like, no, it starts with you.
Yeah.
And you have to start there because exactly as you're saying, there's this ripple effect in a sense, because when your energy changed, he's going to pick up on that and you're creating a new standard in your family.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, he's not going to sit there and do the daily, you know, tasks or whatever, but it was filtering off into him without him even realizing it, I would say. Yeah. And we were making stuff happen. Yeah. I also came to understand that aging is a privilege. So me turning 40 was not a bad thing. Like, how lucky am I to turn 40? A lot of people don't get to 40. And so it was that. And then, you know, that what also stuck with me was our last coaching call, Roseanne, where we played the Remember When game, when I think I said to you, you know, I feel like I'm just going to be the cheerleader on the side, and all these other women in the group are going to be getting pregnant, and I'm going to be thrilled for them. And I always felt like that in my life with my other friends that would be on this journey as well, as that they would be getting pregnant before me, and I'd still be standing on the sidelines going, yes, that's awesome, but still being on the journey myself. And when we played the Remember When game, it was just so powerful that it had me on a high for so long after that, to fully visualize what would happen when this actually did happen for me. And all the ladies, like, how good are the ladies on Full Throttle? Like, some had tears in their eyes, and that community is amazing.
People don't get that. And I love that you're raising, you know, really dropping another bomb of wisdom on us, because this journey is so isolating, you know, just on its own, and the way that, you know, kind of the nature of it, that there is something magical about having real community.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the energy of the community. You know, I mean, people ask me about that all the time, or people want to do private coaching. And I'm like, no, trust me on this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, having this community is everything. It's like, you know, it's like learning a brand new language, right? Like, it's one thing that you do these apps and stuff, but it's another to be dropped right in the center of Rome as you're trying to learn Italian, right? Like, it's a completely different experience. So yeah, I mean, they are wonderful. They are absolutely wonderful. So tell us what happened next.
So another divine delay came in the fact that, you know, so it was May 2023, and I was training for the half marathon already. And so I had this, you know, my plan was to do another cycle and to do it with these immune suppressants, even though I wasn't very keen on it. But I'm like, well, I don't want to do it before. I don't want to do it kind of, you know, while I'm going to be pushing my body to the limit. So in my head, I'd kind of put aside like August or September, I'll do the next one. And so around this time in May, my energy, like the energy was so high. Like I said, there was so much going on in my life, along with all of the property and renovation stuff. I also had 4 different jobs come up for me within my same company, right? But there was a bit of like a restructure going on, and my job was kind of changing a little bit in terms of that. It was effectively just, you know, a different reporting line and a new title, but doing the same thing, but for more money. But then there was also a couple of other jobs, like these other just opportunities kept coming up. And that was really proof to me that when you're living abundantly, abundance flows. So let's get to May 30. And I suddenly felt the desire to start journaling because so much was going on. And I'm not a journaler. I learned that throughout Full Throttle, writing things down was actually really powerful. You can sit and you can think about things, but actually writing it down really translates into being so much stronger. And I just felt this really strong urge to journal. And like I said, I haven't done it probably since I was 10. And back then, my biggest, issues in the world then was what boy I had a crush on. So May 30 was about 1.5 weeks before I was due to ovulate. And I was writing in my journal and I was reading it last night. It's so cool that I'm like, I've had for the second time in a week, I've had this dream about a little boy coming in. And then we get to June 19 and in my journal, I'm writing again. So it's about a week after ovulation by that point. This boy, he's downloading so much information to me in my dreams. Like he's just visiting me constantly. And my actual quote from my journal was, the energy seems to be in overdrive right now. I feel very excitable. I wouldn't be surprised if I conceived this month. It feels like there's something magic in the works. And I have never, ever, ever, ever written or thought anything like that. Like, every month would just be like, hopefully. I never felt like that. So that was crazy to me. We get to the last week of June and my period was due. It didn't come. I went to a friend's party. All of our dogs were there. The dogs were really clingy with me, really affectionate. And it was just another thing that I was just like, just another kind of, just something I just noticed, because dogs are pretty perceptive at things. But my period didn't show up that whole week and I was due to run the half marathon on the Saturday. My mum and my friend who knew I was late, said, are you going to do a test? And I was like, no, if this child's shown up after 5 years of all of this, when I'm doing my most hectic training, like it can handle a half marathon. But also like, if I know that I'm pregnant, I don't know if I would run it or I would be worried the whole time. So I just didn't want to. So I ran the half marathon. I did it in so much faster than whatever. And then the following week, my period still didn't show. And for some reason, I just didn't want to test. Like I was enjoying the what if. I was enjoying the, I didn't want a negative test to ruin it. I just didn't feel the need to really confirm it for whatever reason. And again, I journaled in my journal in that second week that I woke up to hear this really clear voice saying, it's time to do a pregnancy test. I was reading my journal last night and I was like, shit, this is crazy. And so I finally did on a Saturday. I'd spent the whole day pulling up pavers around our pool because we were starting the renovation. So I was 2 weeks late by then. And at the end of the day, I was like, I really want a wine. And I thought, okay, I'm 2 weeks late. I've got to do a test before I have a wine. And sure enough, it came up immediately positive. I was
Oh my goodness. I mean, Tanya, I know what happened, but my heart was beating, like just the way you were sharing that. I'm like, all of this, like you went from like skeptic, allegedly shallow to like writing these things and being in this and knowing you did. I mean, because you said your dream was to conceive this baby naturally.
Yeah, I knew that I was going to, but I didn't believe it at the same time.
Well, what's even crazy? I mean, well, I won't overstate it because I think knowing that this baby was coming and talking about the energy, I mean, that's like magical. But you realize that technically you were more fertile at 40 than you were in your 30s.
Yeah, for sure. Because I was in the right headspace.
Isn't that just wild?
Yeah.
I mean, and this is such a powerful lesson. I hope the ladies listening back this one up and listen to it all over again, because you said you were living your life. You were hiking glaciers. You were training for a marathon. You don't like running and then somehow you love it. You were traveling all over the place, doing renovations. And even more insane, you got to the point where you missed your period, but you're just kind of chilling.
Yeah, I was
enjoying the what if. What woman on this journey enjoys what ifs?
Yeah.
I mean, it's fascinating, this transformation. And this is after 5 years.
Yeah, 5 years. And that was the transformation in those last few months. I was living my life to the full, and the baby didn't become the fixation. The baby just became it'll happen when it's meant to, and it'll be a wonderful blessing on top of an already wonderful life.
Wow. I mean, and this is another example because, like, and I think it's important to illustrate this because you basically compress time and space in a way, because here's this chunk of time in all this suffering. And then you make this decision that you're going to be different. You take the leaps, you start changing your mindset. And so between January 2023
Mhm.
and I guess your ovulation, you said June 19th,
Yeah.
that's like 6-ish months.
Yeah, I mean, I'd only finished full throttle at the end of March, and I conceived, 5 weeks after that Grim Reaper doctor told me that my only options were donors and all of that kind of thing. And how many weeks after? Maybe 6 weeks after my 40th birthday.
Freaking crazy. And it's even crazier that you had this mental block about, I need to make this happen before I'm 40 because then I'll be over the hill. I mean, your experience here really demonstrates that, so many of the things that we're told, like it's only part of the picture. I mean, because can you imagine if you had like this divine delay? I mean, I love that you're raising that too, because it's such a powerful thing. Instead of delays being detrimental, they're actually fucking divine,
Mm,
right?
mhm.
Like if you're willing to see that, and then your baby like visiting you and doing all this stuff in your mind and you can feel it. I mean, dude, this is incredible. I mean, so what about your husband? Was he surprised? Like what was going on?
Yeah, he's very much a planner. And so when I called him up to the ensuite and I was like, look at this, you could just see that he was just like, holy, you could see his mind just rolling around, and he took a little minute to process, because for him, he was like, if it hasn't happened yet, it's probably never going to happen. And I guess the benefit for me was that he was open to bringing a child into this world, but he was never like desperate, which was good for me in the fact that I didn't carry that extra pressure that I was letting him down, as well.
Mm.
But yeah, he's excited now.
Wow. And so, it's a funny thing to be like in this place now
Hmm.
after all of that, after you basically compressing time and space, and like it's like all of those years before were leading you up to this place. So, how many weeks pregnant are you now?
29.
29.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh, it's just incredible to see you like this, Tanya. So if you think back to the woman you were all those years ago when, things started to get dark for you, when you
Hmm.
started to freak out. I mean, as a woman who's demonstrated here that here's these 4.5 years basically, and then here's this half where you made the seemingly impossible possible in such an incredible amount of time by making some of these changes. What would you want that version of you to know?
I think it really just comes down to, for me, that we're not, like I said earlier, we're not here to sleepwalk through life. We're here to grow and evolve and live life to the fullest and make the most of our time on this earth. So go and do that and appreciate everything that you have, not the couple of things that you don't have. And, like, we have control of how we think and feel every day. And, I've got a friend who was not from a fertility sense, but she was feeling like she was struggling a lot. And I was just like, you have the power to turn around your thinking. So, things aren't happening to you, they're happening for you, and you have the power. I know I'm quoting you. And you have the power to determine the trajectory of your life. And the bigger you live your life, the better things come for you as well. Like, you just open the gates, the floodgates open. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. I mean, Tanya, it's such a thrill to see you in this place. I mean, think about what, and you don't have to tell us if you're not announcing it, but like,
Mm.
or if you're having a boy, I mean, just think about, what you're going to be able to teach this baby,
Mhm.
right? Like, think about, like, you're going to be able to teach from a place of having lived it. Like, it's not theoretical for you. You're living proof. And think about how this has the possibility and frankly the certainty, because you are different. You're necessarily going to teach your kids different. But think about how this impacts your family tree.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I just think it's so cool that I've got the recordings and I've got the journaling to show this child that we were connecting before they even, you know, conceived.
I think that's extraordinary.
Yeah, it's so cool. So the other thing that the universe threw for a loop is, and the spirit baby medium had explained this to me before, that, in the months before conception, often the spirit baby that's incarnating will go quiet. And so I was obviously dreaming about this boy a lot around the time of conception, and I was certain it was a boy. And we did our gender reveal 4 weeks ago. And I was again reading my journal last night. 3 weeks before the gender reveal, I journaled that I dreamt that we had the gender reveal and I discovered it was a girl. And I also wrote in there that the energy of people's predictions, how everyone's like, oh, I think it's a whatever. At the start of my pregnancy, a lot of people were saying overwhelmingly it was a boy. And that massively shifted to people predicting it was going to be a girl. And so at our gender reveal, when we let off the smoke cannons, out came Pink.
Oh, so it was a girl. I mean, like, because that was the first baby that spoke to you.
Yeah, the girl that was consistently the most present in my meditations, was the most present for the psychics and everything. It's a girl.
Oh my gosh. Like, oh wow. I mean, I'm gonna have a whiskey after this. Just kidding. Like, I mean, like, it's, I love that you're sharing this and how kind and how generous you are to share your experience with us, because I think so many women feel this, but we've been conditioned to blow that off as nonsense. And I think our intuition and our connection to our children gets laughed off. And I think what you're doing here is really showing us how strong that connection can be. And the more you lean into it, exactly as you said,
Mm-hmm.
the more you're going to see it, the more that you're going to feel it. And you can take comfort in connecting to that, even when the present physical circumstances don't indicate that.
Yeah, exactly. And, like I said, some of the things that I knew were coming out of my mouth, I'd probably want to commit myself to, but you have to trust that there is, you did a podcast the other week, it was kind of like you needed the proof. What was the title of it?
Oh, what was it? The price of the prove it mentality.
Yeah, the prove it mentality. And for the longest time, that was also my thing. I'd be talking to my mum about it. My mum's been super engaged in this whole journey and been a wonderful support. And she was always of the belief that this girl was coming too. But, I used to say to her, if this actually transpires as to how it's happened, then whoa, I'll believe it. But, now it is, because the other thing that, Peter has said is, he says, throughout your pregnancy, I just see the doctors going, everything's good. Everything's like going along as exactly as it has, as it's meant to. Everything's perfect. And that's exactly what's happened so far. We haven't had any issues apart from sucking the life out of me to the point that I had basically no iron left in my body, but that's
Well, they said she's going to be a firecracker.
Yeah, exactly. And he's also
she's letting you know.
He's predicted that she'll turn up probably slightly early and maybe in a firehouse or something like that. So I guess I better prepare myself for that, given that everything else has happened. But the interesting thing also is that, remember, he predicted February 2020, or he said, I can see you in February with a bump. She's due in February.
Oh, man. Oh, my goodness. I mean,
Or you just had the year wrong. Yeah.
yeah. Well, but see, isn't that cool though?
Mhm.
Like, even look at the change in you and the way that you are processing this, because, it's funny. I hear people say all the time, oh, well, I thought it was going to be this month and I was wrong. And people say this, people say that, but it's like, dude, stay in the game. Who
Mhm.
cares? Change the date. Right? You've probably heard me say that before, is like, just change the date. There's nothing wrong with being wrong. Maybe you're wrong about this month, but what if it's the next one? And it's funny to me that you were training for a marathon, because in some ways this journey was a marathon in and of itself.
Yeah.
Wow. And I love that you were doing things, Tanya, that felt good to you.
Yeah.
You weren't allowing fear to, interrupt you from your training or doing things that really mattered to you. I mean, that's such a testament to what was changing within you, and really the power of mindset. So I always like to ask this question, because I mean, you've been dropping bombs left and right, and we love them. We appreciate them.
Mm.
But if you were going to speak directly to the women listening, really about, like, if you're going to speak to them, if you had like a few seconds of their undivided attention, what would you want them to know?
I think it's that point of that you have to trust yourself. You need to go within and really know in your heart what is right for you. There's plenty of us that get pushed into IVF because there's been a little bit of a journey and a little bit of a delay in conception. You need to trust yourself. You need to connect with and understand that your children are prompting you on this journey. I fully believe that these children have prompted me to take this path. And so, yeah, just trust yourself and go inward and truly believe what you know to be true.
That's so good. That's so good, Tanya. Well, hey, thank you so much for your kindness and generosity in sharing this with all of us. I know that this is going to touch so many lives and really encourage women to tap into their intuition, be a little weird,
Yeah.
believe, be willing to see dragonflies and rainbows and things like that. I mean, there's nothing weird or weak or freaky about any of that. I mean, I think we're naturally energetic creatures, and that, this is all around us. And when you started seeing the signs, Tanya, they were there.
Exactly.
So, wow. So well done, woman. And thank you so much again. We're so happy for you, so excited for you. And I can't wait to see the baby pictures.
Thank you. And thank you for everything that you guided me to do. Honestly, it was a game changer, not just for this journey, but for life.
It's such my pleasure. I mean, I love working with women like you, because you make my work easy, because you were ready. Your attitude was open, your heart was open, and it's a pleasure. And this is, your experiences, that's one of the things that keeps me doing what I do, because I want everybody to have their own unique experience, much like yours. So that's awesome, woman. Well, thank you so much, Tanya.
Thank you.
Love this episode of the Fearlessly Fertile podcast? Subscribe now and leave an awesome review. Remember, the desire in your heart to be a mom is there because it was meant for you. When it comes to your dreams, keep saying hell yes.